regarding the Berkshire County Education Task Force. Yes, go get food. Go get
That will be the
Thank you.
one.
I'll be brief. When the task force was founded in 2015 as a result of the meeting just like this one, its role was to determine the facts regarding Berkshire County's educational enrollment, fiscal and programmatic situation, and to make recommendations for addressing the problems created by these facts. At the outset, the task force decided that the key matter it would be concerned with was the highest quality education our students could receive. Our work took place in 3 stages over 2 years. First, a data-heavy report on these facts was done for the task force by the Donahue Institute of UMass Amherst. This was shared with various constituencies in nearly 50 public meetings in late 2016 and early 2017. Next, the task force commissioned and received a report on educational options that would maximize educational opportunities and outcomes. That report was done by District Management Group of Boston. Finally, after lengthy consideration of all of District Management Group's 6 options, the task force voted to recommend, and I think most people here know this, that despite the significant obstacles en route to its accomplishment, the best educational outcomes for all Berkshire County students under the demographic, financial, and organizational conditions that obtain in this county currently and for the foreseeable future would be realized through establishment of a single county-wide school district. This recommendation was disseminated to the school committees, town and city governments, business roundtables, and media during the first half of 2017. The second half. In the 3 years since the task force was organized, the problems that led to its creation under the auspices of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees have not gone away. As the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission's handout for tonight's meeting shows, and as expected since we first saw the longitudinal numbers in 2015, the enrollment decline that's been occurring in Berkshire County for a generation has continued. That fact, combined with the continued financial stress affecting many Berkshire County communities, which has been a topic of a good deal of discussion here this evening, caused in large measure by ever-inflating health insurance and labor costs, Chapter 78 that has effectively been held harmless, and ever greater reliance on property taxes, will, should serious interventions not take place, continue to have a deleterious effect on the quality of the education available to many Berkshire County students. And that will not only mean academic disadvantagement for our children, it will erode the economic and social character of the Berkshires. Efforts have accelerated in the last 3 years to establish or enhance collaboration between districts. Much that has happened in inter-district collaboration has taken place under the auspices of the Southern Berkshire Educational Future Initiative, which was begun by Representative Pignatelli, while some efforts at collaboration elsewhere in the county have not succeeded. Moreover, tentative conversations between districts regarding greater regionalization, perhaps occasioned by the task force's work, perhaps not, have taken place. None, however, have yet addressed head-on long-term reorganization of schools, expanding opportunities for high-quality academic programming, or putting schools on a sounder financial footing. As many of you know, the task force last met on September 22nd. At that time, we acknowledged how much remains to be accomplished in our schools if we're to meet the current and future educational needs of Berkshire County residents. The task force therefore voted to proceed on a 2-track course. First, the task force will, to the extent possible, provide financial support and expertise to efforts by Berkshire County school districts to engage in larger scale and more intensive efforts at collaboration on the provision of programs and services to students, and also on more extensive regionalization than is currently the case. Second, the task force will also work toward developing well-informed and detailed models for implementing its July 2017 recommendation for a single county-wide district. The models developed will address thorny, though hardly insoluble, issues that would have to be dealt with for a single district to be realized. A non-exhaustive list of topics that would require workable, sustainable resolution would include governance, administration, finance, accountability status under DESE regulations, coordination of collective bargaining agreements, transportation, and legislation needed if such a district is to be formed and to operate successfully. Funding for the work entailed along each course would be available in 2018 and 19 from a sizable appropriation dedicated to the work of the task force made in the FY 2019 Commonwealth budget. This item was introduced by Senator Hines in the Senate and was supported by the entire Berkshire delegation in the House. Other funding will be sought from other sources, private and public, that we can identify. Finally, we've heard a number of times over the last 3 years that Berkshire County's efforts, spearheaded by the task force, are being watched closely elsewhere in Massachusetts, where other counties or regions are facing problems similar to what we face. With the fact that we are something of a bellwether in mind, and in response to a question I posed to Mr. Kuchar at our last meeting, we were assured that this two-track approach would be supported by MASC, just as the work of the task force to date has been supported.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Thoughts, comments? Panel?
I'm more curious what
Yeah.
the room has to say.
Okay. Audience?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's hear it.
The big ticket items, the bold, broad scheme, that's fine. If they blow up, if they're successful, okay. But from my point of view, from my perspective, it seems like there's a whole lot of islands of excellence out there already. We just need to provide a ferry service. For example, a lot of really small schools would like to have an AP something class, but they only have 3 or 4 students that would even go into it, let alone the logistics of having to hire a faculty member to do that. And then even if you had that one class, what's the faculty member do the rest of the day? Teach art or something else. It seems that every high school, and I'm in a vocational at McCann, they have a state-of-the-art video conferencing system where, geez, that's a possibility to have that class in 3 or 4 different locations, 4 or 5 different locations, to have it during school, and the virtual high schools where I thought, the state owns 2, I thought you had to go to that high school. You couldn't like take one course, but you can. They have the mechanism and the model in place to try this, to try to have an AP, I don't know, AP Physics, AP Science, or some class that you'd love to have, but you can't because you don't have the teacher, you only have a few students. I think there needs to be some really tiny initiatives to get the blood boiling. I think the teachers on the ground, the students on the ground, and because of Uber Home Rule Massachusetts, the voters on the ground want to see something that's not the higher level of abstraction, which, the school system's getting together one district-wide. I think folks have a hard time getting their brain around it. I think it'd be much more attractive if there was something that their child went to. They had AP whatever. They had an advanced biology class that we have the nuggets in place. All we need to do is find the ferry service. And if a high school or middle school doesn't have the video conferencing capability, well, what they have is a whole bunch of really tech-savvy middle school kids who do that constantly with FaceTime and all, that can happen. I think the idea, the task force is doing an excellent job up here. But down here, especially in central and northern Berkshire, where I'm a little more familiar, I think those things would grab people. I think that would grab people, and it would fall into the model of, well, we have lots of islands of excellence, and we have a ferry service, we just don't know we have it. We can do that, and I think the task force can do that by looking at smaller nuggets to get something started. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll add a little bit. I'm known for like saying things that other people won't say, so here it goes. 3 years ago, there was a meeting in here, and there was probably 80 people sitting in this room, and they were hot, and they were riled up. Their budgets were in trouble. They were getting rid of teachers. Things had to be done. And then the task force was created. Some really great minds sat in that room, and they took out all parochialism, and they said, what is the best for the student, for the child? What is the best education plan? And then they started putting things together, trying not to make recommendations or tell people they had to do something a certain way. So there was a lot of nuance to it. And then when the numbers came in, because let's face it, it's all about finances. Where's the money coming from? It was realized if one district was created, and again, that's the aspiration. There's many steps to get there. Combining a Southern Berkshire, a Central Berkshire hub, a Northern Berkshire hub, maybe morphing into a single district. No one losing a job, no one closing a building. All of those things were laid out so everyone was protected. Yet, all everyone heard was, they want to do one district, and then what's going to happen to my school? Because that's where we live, right? That's how we're governed. We're in a small New England governance. It's okay. So it is best to start looking at how we can do things together. A simple thing of sharing an AP class, when we have 3 kids in Lee and there's 3 kids at Berkshire Hills, is about schedules, because not everyone has the same schedule. And so now you got to line that up. And so what the next step the task force is looking into is laying that framework. Someone actually has to map that out and go to Berkshire Hills and go to Southern Berkshire and North Adams and say, what are your schedules? Where can we line up? Who can do it for us? And that's where, yes, we gave you the 40,000 foot version, and now you want to see the actual details. And you might not like them, and we're very aware of that, because that's where you start. If you might not like it, it starts a conversation that goes somewhere else and begins to have another outcome, right? So the task force has worked very hard, and they've done it all volunteered, and really, really great minds in that room, but they're revamping, and they need more minds in that room. And they were like a rededication of the commitment. We had a pass. Your budgets were okay this year. Your health insurance did not go up that much. What's going to happen next year? Is that 0.5% that it went up this year, is it going to be 9? Because it's going to catch up, right? Health insurance is a big hit for any district. So I hope that in a year we're sitting here saying we shared 5 different classes across the county and it was excellent. And I hope the conversation isn't, how are we all going to combine because I can't afford to keep my budget and I'm going to lose 10 teachers. So there's my thank you.
I'll say ditto. I think the conversation is changing slowly but surely. Where we were 3 or 4 years ago is, I think, very different than where we are today. I have to go back to my sister, who spent her career in Washington, D.C., who reminded me when I first got elected, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We all have ideas. We want it done the right way. Everybody should be on board with me because it's my idea. That doesn't happen. We're in a marathon, so we got to just keep at it. There's not a person in this room that is sitting at this table that hasn't complained about Boston doesn't care about the Berkshires. Sometimes that's not bad. We have a unique opportunity here in the Berkshires, and I think the task force is getting us there to have the conversation. Talk is cheap, but it's cheap to talk. Let's talk. So I think the fact that we're so far from the State House, we border 3 states, we have a unique opportunity, I think, to be a pilot. I think there are other places in the state that are looking at what we're doing because they're feeling the same crunch.
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod and the Berkshires, the bookends of the Commonwealth. But I think there's other areas in the state, Franklin County, shrinking population, aging demographics, same conversation, very rural, much more rural than we are even. But we're having the conversation, and I think that's a very productive thing. I think Glenn has done a wonderful job of representing all of your interests, but I think we have a unique opportunity to keep the conversation going. We have given a little bit of money, probably could have been more, should have been more, but the fact is that the schools are sitting at the table in the same room that weren't happening before. When this all started in the Southern Berkshires, not one of you superintendents, and there's some new ones here, so I can't blame all of you, we didn't even have similar school calendars. We now have a streamlined school calendar so that all the schools in South County can have professional development on the same day, because that's what the calendar was laid out. Those are simple things, but the fact that we didn't really realize that before was really important. So I think we just got to keep that conversation going. We have a lot more to do. I don't want you to lose sight of this all started with money. We could give you billions of dollars tomorrow, which we can't, but if we could, that doesn't mean the conversation about where we're going in the future needs to stop. And I think that's what we got to keep in perspective. So, you know, I've had a somewhat rocky relationship with the task force,
It's okay, Smith, we love it.
and you're coming around to my thinking, which is good.
I think you've just morphed into liking what we got to say.
Well, no, but seriously, I've been talking about collaboration and shared services right from the get-go, and we don't need ownership of this. We have a common goal, we gotta move the county forward, we gotta educate our children for a great life. There's not many places that the three of us go as legislators that we don't see a help wanted at. Whether it be Lee Provost and Lee looking at HVAC tech, to Sheffield Plastics looking to hire 25 or 30 people today, to General Dynamics looking to hire 100 or 150 engineers tomorrow. So the needs are there. We have an opportunity to start streamlining the workforce of tomorrow. The silver tsunami is coming. It is hitting the Berkshires very hard. If we're not paying attention, I think we're all going to be in trouble. I think the task force and the legislators were paying attention together. And with your input, I think we can solve some of these problems.
Real quickly, luckily I shaved my beard today, so all my silver just went away. I haven't spoken with you folks about this yet, because this is basically my first one. But I can't say enough about the important work that's been taking place every third Saturday for the last few years, and the importance of this work. To me, it's there are always going to be times when we get ahead of ourselves and statements that are made public and plans that some people don't like. But it is incredibly exciting to think about how can we as a region make sure that every kid in every school has a top-rate education. And we just heard one example right there, that if we focus on how each school and each school committee and each superintendent gets what they want and how they gain from this, again, an amazing opportunity to say that, you know, I grew up in a rural school that had actually I think we only had 1 or 2 AP courses. If somebody was able to say, you know what, or you can dial in and have this added to your education, are you kidding me? I would have been the first one in line. And by the way, that was before I had a cell phone or even had an email address or anything like that. That's just one example, and I think there are countless opportunities here, and it is going to take the hard work, and it is going to take all of us putting our heads together and being honest, and it's probably will get ugly, but the goal is to address these deep, deep concerns around funding and enrollment and beyond.
And I definitely want to thank the members of the task force who spent, you know, every third Saturday for how many hours. I think I'd rather get a root canal than do the work that all of you have done and the patience that it took. It's really very admirable. I will say that as these initiatives come up and people have different ideas about how they want to do video conferencing for classes, or they have another idea for doing a combination around personnel directors or purchasing or special ed directors or cafeteria service, all the different ideas that people have, and there needs to be funding to be able to get that work done initially so that there's savings, you know, later on, then you certainly have a team up here who supports getting that funding. I mean, Smitty has shown over and over again, you know, that that funding is something that we can convince people at the State House that that's very worth it. So we certainly have partners in this with all of us.
You brought up a point I forgot to mention, which is it's hard to read in the paper that people are making up their minds already about a plan that hasn't even been discussed. And I always come back to my mind about we haven't really had the state at the table yet. We haven't had DESE at the table to say, here's the incentives we would provide to a school district for X action. And I think there's a lot there. So I'm glad you brought that up and flag it as something that needs to be seriously considered, because the districts are honestly sitting with a lot of power right now because we are leading the way.
And I think too, just to add another thing, that I was fortunate enough to go to 22 of the different towns, select boards, school committees with Mr. Clark. And there's other things that are happening that come into education, economic development, broadband. When I met with the Beckett Selectmen to talk about what we could do from the task force, you know, I talked about all these great sharing of classes, and they said, well, how can we do that? We have a broadband issue. And then when I talked to the Pittsfield Council, and they don't have a broadband issue, but they may have a student who lives in Beckett who choices into Pittsfield to go to Taconic and may have a homework assignment they can't get on the internet to do. Now Pittsfield might have an issue with broadband because it affects their student outcomes. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, Jake. But it is very interconnected, and even though we live in our own little lane, we are really in this together. Okay. So, anything out there? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a comment about division, MASC,
Okay.
but it's not about education task force.
Okay.
So I don't know when to say that.
Well, next.
It works for me.
Which is in a year, at the next meeting, we meet annually. The executive director's here, he'll be happy to answer your questions, Glenn. You can ask it.
Oh, now
Oh,
I have
yeah.
a question. I was just gonna, Division 8 is the Voc Tech
Yes.
division of MASC. And McCann is in that division, but we have a hard time meeting. And I go to the Division 8 meetings, I'm gonna suggest we need to do video conferencing. But it occurs to me that there are an awful lot of Voc Tech schools that aren't part of Division 8 and should be, like Taconic, which has really a Voc Tech school that could benefit from being part of Division 8, I think, just to exchange information with teachers, because the teachers there probably don't have another colleague in the county except at McCann, which I don't know. But to raise the, to raise the level of all boats raises all the quality. So I get the bottom line is that Division 8 not just look at Voc Tech schools, but look at academic high schools that have a big Voc Tech and include them. I think that'd be a benefit for everybody.
We're just Taconic again, but many of our urban districts with tech schools as part of their high schools are also part of Division 8 and do participate actively, so.
I thought you only, it was like only McCann.
No, if you were in Pittsfield, you could be part of two different divisions.
Okay. Okay, well, solve that problem already.
Well, if we have no more comments, Bob, you got to
No,
come?
I was just checking it out.
Okay. I'll bring it up at the next board meeting, too.
Can I just say, I saw that John Barrett's name is on here. We were with him before we came here, and he apologized. He had to go to a wake. I don't know if you relayed that.
At this time, I would like to thank Senator Adam Hines and the representative from Paul Mark's office, Tricia Farley-Bouvier, and Smitty Pignatelli for joining us this evening. Thank you very much for your time. We know how important it is, and we appreciate you listening. And with that, we will be adjourning this meeting.